the submission from the Christchurch City Council on Better Urban Planning draft report prepared by the New Zealand Productivity Commission. Richard, welcome. Would someone like to move the approval of the submission? Okay. You'll move it. Tim moves it, seconded by David. Vicky.
In relation to the intent behind this, because I actually read most of this document, and I actually got the sense that it was kind of designed for Auckland, Tauranga, Hamilton, and I didn't get a sense of the rest of the country really being included in what felt to me to be a very narrow economic, sort of economist's view of how the housing market works. So, I mean, I also worried about the letter from you and Carleen saying the council is to some extent at the forefront of urban planning, and then quoting that we have an independent hearings panel, which I would not put at the forefront of urban planning in any way, shape or form, actually, and not one I would wish on anybody. But it just felt like a sort of Auckland-based study. Well, I don't know how you felt about it, or whether you're allowed to have feelings about it.
I think I'm allowed to have feelings. I think certainly quite a few of the examples they use do seem to have an Auckland theme to them, and obviously the land supply issue is probably more acute there than it is in other parts of the country, and you would have seen the submission we put on the draft national policy statement, which sought to address that, and that did seem again to have a bit of an Auckland flavour to it, but it's not unique to Auckland. Other parts of the country do have land supply issues. Obviously, as you know from our submission on that document, we're reasonably flush in terms of our land supply here, both from an intensification and a greenfield perspective. So I think that is a reasonably fair reflection of the document. And we have met with the Productivity Commission on a couple of occasions. They have come down here and spoken to us. They do have a keen interest in what's happened in Christchurch. And I guess the comment about the independent hearings panel is that it appears to us that that's where the government is moving. They've signalled that in some of their changes, so that
that was one of the things that was horrific about the concept, and the idea that we would somehow...
The context doesn't change if you cross out that first line.
Yep.
So it says a replacement district plan delivered within 3 years, because I think the issue is that it's a balance, do you go through a long process that takes, like 10 years for our first district plan, a full replacement plan with 2 plans merged. I personally wouldn't recommend that to anyone in the future, to go through that in such a truncated period.
No,
but to have a plan within 3 years, I mean, that's the trade-off. But I agree with Vicky. I think that if I could have my time again, I would choose the legislative route and let the government take full responsibility, because as you highlight in the submission, we don't receive recommendations from the IHP, they make decisions.
Yes, so it's different to the Auckland Council, IHP, and the process there.
Yanni.
I just wanted to touch on that as well, that I think one of the major issues with the IHP is the fact that government appoint those commissioners as well, so they're not really independent, and we should be I personally think we should actually be quite critical of that, I don't believe we should support independent hearings panels, but B, that they're not independent if they're appointed by government, and if the citizens of the city have no accountability to land use decisions, then why would we adopt that? So I also think it would be good to have put some comment around the inability of communities to participate in any real sort of meaningful way through the IHP process, because it becomes like a court rather than a conversation, and that actually excludes a huge amount of people, and if you look at what happened with intensive residential housing in Linwood, for example, the views of the ordinary people that live in that area were almost completely discounted in favour of lawyers and economists, And I think that's a major failing, and it doesn't really come through strongly enough in this submission. I think the only other thing is that the idea that, I don't think you can separate this from the context of local government changes, but the idea that the government can do statements of expectation around how councils should do their district plans, I think is incredibly alarming. And our experience shows that even though the majority of people in Christchurch supported getting better urban design principles, the statement of expectation removed it without any public consultation with our community.
Yeah, and energy efficiency.
So, I just think we need to be a lot more stronger in our criticism of this failed experiment here in terms of the impact on local citizens, which has been to basically exclude them from the things that they want.
I agree with that, because Christchurch is held up as the example of how we fixed housing, and actually none of the things that they said they actually did. So I wouldn't like the rest of the country to believe that and to adopt things that are detrimental to community well-being in the belief that it will fix housing. So
Yeah,
I would be much more critical of, and I mean the questions they're asking are so stupid anyway.
But the lack of community engagement in the process was one of its biggest flaws. I mean, in any environment, engaging with the community about the kind of place they want to live, it's pretty fundamental. And in a post-disaster environment, it's even more important. So I'm kind of with Yanni and Vicky. So Raf and then Phil and Glenn.
Yeah, quick one. So question 10.3 around alternative funding systems. Do you think we could actually say in paragraph 2 there is also a strong case for government to make a contribution? You put there as a case.
Yes,
we
we
can
can
strong
say that.
case.
Yep.
Yeah, given that they've sort of stepped tentatively into that space.
Yep.
Phil and then Glenn.
Thank you, Richard. I just, you express very strongly about, I think it's in the bottom of paragraph 2, about the community feeling really disempowered. And I think Yanni referred to some aspects of the amendment, or the Local Government Act and the amendments. This submission is to the New Zealand Productivity Commission, I know, but could we also refer to the other, I guess, changes that government are making as well, that in fact they are all rather aligned and alarming?
Yes, and I think that was what we attempted to get across there. And I think if you look at item 4 on the covering letter in relation to links with other reforms going on, there are a lot of documents out there. Obviously, they're looking at the Resource Management Act, there's the MPS, and there's this, and there's other work streams being done by local government. So it's a matter of they all have a similar theme to them. And it is, consistent with the approach that Vicky referred to earlier on in terms of, where the government's moving to on this space. So, we can put something in there around that.
Glenn.
Thank you. I sense the frustration in our submission in 4.7, Roman numeral 3, page 920, over land supply. So, seems to be a bit of an obsession with this. Have you picked up any hints from the Productivity Commission over a piece of work towards construction costs in the housing sector? Are there any hints that could actually be taken as part of the equation?
It didn't seem to. The last time we met with them was some time ago. As I just mentioned earlier on, there are examples around the country where land supply is particularly acute. We're not one of those places.
No.
We have a huge amount of greenfields and intensification available to people. I'm not sure if the construction cost was a particular issue. That's something I'd have to look at a little bit closer. But certainly land supply is a keen focus. But I think if you think back a few years ago, the narrative around the issue, particularly in relation to Auckland, was all about land supply. Mm-hmm. And now I think there's a recognition that the issue is far broader than that. That is one of the problems, undoubtedly, in Auckland. Mm-hmm. And the unitary plan up there has sought to address it. But the Auckland's the problems are far more complex than just about land supply, and so yes.
Okay.
I actually wonder whether there should be a sort of a paragraph offered on the new regeneration planning process.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
because, I mean, I think if we don't mention it, then they may not actually see it as as another way of doing things that has, you know, community engagement built into the decision-making framework, and it's almost like that's the alternative for objections and legalistic sort of processes that and hearings, and then you know, obviously a sign-off, but a restricted sign-off from the minister in this case. It wouldn't be the minister for the, I mean, it probably would be the minister for the environment, or in other cases, in terms of RMA, I would guess if it was being seen as a model for elsewhere, but restricted to basically you have to give the tick if it meets the policy objective of the legislation, and that's, you know, I think we could put that in as a very positive framework that we have here in Christchurch.
Yep, I can add a paragraph in relation to that.
Cool. So we don't need to write in the specifics of the changes. You've noted all of those.
Well, I'm just thinking approval. This is obviously a draft, and you've
Okay.
asked for some changes of me, so I'm happy to put those in. But it'd be good to have something on the delegations re approval of the final version, if you want to delegate that to the CE or delegate that to.
When does it have to be
Councillor.
in by?
I'll just bring it back next week.
What's the closing date for the
It
submission?
is October 4th, I think.
Okay, well, so but we'll all be around. So there's a meeting next week, so we could just sign it off next week.
Sign it off next week.
Yep.
Okay,
Is that all right?
that's fine.
Would
So
you
should I
accept
bring
the
it bring it
next
back?
item on the
I'm
agenda?
not sure. It's getting a longer and longer meeting. It's fine.
So should I bring it as a late report to the next week's agenda?
Yeah.
If everyone's okay with it.
Yep. That seems like a best idea. So so what do we want? We'll have do we just leave it lying on the table until it's amended, or yeah? Okay. So that the council requests that the amended submission be brought back to council on the 29th of September for final approval. Thank you. So I'm happy to move that. Seconded. Glenn, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried.